This book changes people's lives. It is called The Artist Way by Julia Cameron. It is a 12-week course that helps you unlock your creativity. It is kind of like a self-help book that teaches you different exercises and techniques to harness your creative skills and talents. I've heard about this book for a couple of years now, and I always wanted to read it, and ever since I heard that Dochi also read it, I had to give it a try as well. So I did, and I'm here to talk about each week, how it went, my journey, my takeaways, and did it change my life, and will it change yours? So let's get started. Before you start the course, you're introduced to a couple of topics. The first one being is the basic tools, which are morning pages and artist dates. Morning pages are a stream of consciousness type of journaling, where every morning you wake up and you write 3 pages of whatever you're thinking and feeling, and you move on with your day. And you basically have to do it every morning throughout this course. The purpose of the morning pages is to get rid of your inner critic and tap into your creative self. Then we have the artist dates, which are basically going on a date with yourself or / your inner artist. So it could be like going to a museum, going thrift shopping. The purpose of this would be like collecting inspiration in some kind of way. It could be something really simple. It doesn't have to cost money. It doesn't have to be big. You can go to your library and just look at books. You can go and watch the movie that you always wanted to watch in the cinema. It's like a one-on-one time with your artist self, if that makes sense. And that one you have to do every week. Another topic that Cameron touches on before starting this book is the mention of God. The book talks about God in relation to creativity and spirituality, I guess. And if the reader does not believe in God, they can replace the name with something else, like the great creator or the universe. And for me, I don't really believe in God. If you do, that's totally fine with me. I'm cool with that, but I don't. And well, I thought to replace the word God with the universe because I guess I kind of believe in that, but you know. So I went with universe for now. And I mention this now because it is important for later. So we finally start week 1, recovering a sense of safety. In general, this book covers a lot of topics, so I'm gonna tell you about my main takeaways, because if I talk about all the takeaways that you can possibly have by reading this book, this video would have been 5 hours long. So firstly, week 1 talks about the shadow artist. It is an artist that, well, lives in the shadows, meaning they maybe marry someone who's creative because they want to be creative themselves and believes that not everybody can create art, so they make themselves small and think that they're not good enough in some ways. Especially when they measure themselves against artists that are masters at their craft, thinking that they could never be them. And week 1 is also about deconstructing of what it is to be an artist, because a lot of us have this assumption that artists most likely are loners and unhappy and addicted to drugs and don't have a family. But it is not always the case. This chapter also gives you the reasoning for doing morning pages. It introduces the concept of your creative self and your critical self, and the fact that you need to silence your critic before you can access your creative self. The morning pages just allow you to start writing and not really fully think through what you're actually doing. And that's kind of how creativity works. You make mistakes, you play around, you see what you like, what you don't like, and if you have the self-critic that tells you that, oh, this is not good enough, or this is bad, what are we doing, then you can't really fully be creative. And I've been doing morning pages for already, I think, about 2 years now. And to be honest, they work. They are nice. I like journaling because I have too many thoughts in my head. So it helps you to just get it on paper and move on with your day. To be honest, the first week wasn't really helpful for me, mainly because I don't really have art block right now, and neither did I have it when I was reading this book. I feel like right now I'm pursuing my creative dreams. I am making YouTube videos and I'm making a game with a friend of mine, which is pretty fun. But in general, I think it's a nice introduction to someone who maybe feels lost and needs some guidance. And you might be thinking, why am I reading this book then? Well, I'm still curious to see if the book can help me in some ways and how it helps other people. Moving on to week 2, recovering a sense of identity. This week talks about attention. It reminds you that the small details in your daily life is what fuels your creativity. And also talks about the people that you should avoid, or warns you about people that might drain your energy or might dwindle your creativity. I never used the word dwindle. What does it mean? Dwindle? Diminish gradually in size. Bro, that's the correct word. That's crazy. Well, this is something that I had to learn myself. I sometimes tell people my ideas or what my future plan is with my creative endeavors, and they just kind of don't really see the vision. And sometimes when I talk to them, it feels like they just want to bring me down. Some of them, I know that they really truly care about me and want the best for me, but they just don't really understand what I'm doing, and therefore they try to come up with solutions that don't really work for me. And so this chapter also talks about the boundaries you should set with some people and the fact that you should be careful when choosing who you want to share things with. So in week 2, the exercises was to list your friends that are helpful and nice, and maybe friends that are not so helpful and nice when you share something with them. Week 2 wasn't really that helpful for me because I lived through it and I learned how to deal with these things. But it was nice to see that I'm not alone with these sorts of things, which is always the case, but sometimes you just forget. So, week 3, recovering a sense of power. Week 3 is about the fear of starting and exploring new ideas. It talks about past criticism and synchronicity, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. For fear, Cameron again explains that this is the reason why you do morning pages, is to quiet down your self-critic and to allow yourself to explore new opportunities. And because you explored the opportunities that you were fearful of doing in the first place, synchronicity might happen. Which means, for example, you want to write a book and you decided to, well, join a book club because you also like reading. And somehow in this book club you met a publisher and they really like the idea of your book and maybe they ask for the first draft. So the idea is when you commit to creativity, unexpected opportunities coincidentally start appearing. And instead of dismissing it, you should embrace the signs that you're on the right path and go for it. The author kind of explains that this is a moment where stuff might start to happen because you start writing your morning pages and you went on artist dates. And so maybe something happens and maybe something doesn't. But if it does, pay attention and write it down in your morning pages. For me, as I mentioned before, I already was doing the morning pages for like 2 years now. So I think it has happened to me in the past in some ways, but when I was reading it, not that much, I would say. At least not at this point. We'll see. And for week 3, the exercises were kind of like look back at your childhood self, what you liked doing, and maybe you should start doing it again. But there was 1 or 2 exercises that were kind of weird, which was like list 5 dead people that you would want to meet. And to be honest, I don't really think about that at all. And I don't really have anyone that I would want to meet that is dead. So I don't know. I didn't know what to say to that question. And also there were some exercises that encourage you to do the morning pages, that they're useful and worth it. So moving on to week 4, recovering a sense of integrity. Week 4, we start off by again encouraging the morning pages that they're nice and useful. And at this point I'm like, I know, I get it. You don't have to just keep convincing me. I feel like every week you're trying to convince me and I'm convinced. And I've been doing them. But also I understand that someone who's starting this book as being blocked and lost, that they need some encouragement and maybe they're skeptical about these morning pages. They might need this, but for me I was like, guys, it's okay. I'm here. I'm doing my part. You don't need to convince me more. So I just needed to get this off my chest. Other than that, week 4 is about tuning into your desires, interests, and creative impulses without the outside noise telling you what you should and should not do. Like, for example, you always wanted to do salsa dancing, but you just don't because you think you don't have time, or, you know, you have to go through the hassle of signing up and looking at the classes. And this chapter tells you, hey, maybe you should do them. Like, you always thought about them, so go ahead, try them out. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. And this week is also about discovering your forgotten joys, the things that you enjoyed as a child and you just don't do anymore, like painting. Like, you remember you painted a lot as a child and now you just don't seem to find time for it. But maybe you should start again. You really liked it, so why not do it now? And this chapter finishes off with a big exercise of the week, which is a reading deprivation. So basically, you shouldn't read for the week. that doesn't mean you shouldn't read the stuff you need for work or like, I don't know, your bills. You probably are allowed to read those, but you shouldn't read for fun. And as it was written in this book, many people were confused by this exercise, and so was I. And to be honest, I didn't do it. But wait, let me explain. Because I just recently started reading more books, I didn't want to stop that habit. And I think the main purpose of this exercise is to actually not to stop reading, it is to get bored. Is to get so bored that you actually start doing things that you want to do. Or exploring new things. And I have been there like a couple of months before reading this chapter. And well, after spending like a couple of hours scrolling on social media, I was just super bored and I had nothing to do in the evenings. And then I decided that maybe I should start painting because that sounds like a nice hobby. And then some other weeks I was like, maybe I should craft something. So now, because I was so bored, I started painting just for fun. And I think that's the main goal of this reading deprivation, is to get so bored that you actually start doing something that you like. And it was successful. And I did it a couple months ago, kind of naturally. So I didn't feel like doing it this time either, because there's nothing else I could do. I mean, there is, but in general, I think it's a good exercise. It just wasn't really the perfect time for me. You know, I just started reading my freaking... What was I reading back then? I just started reading Conversations with People I Hate, and I'm not putting down that book. I need to finish it and see how it ends. So, good book, by the way. So, if you want to get bored, stop reading and stop scrolling on social media. But besides that big task, you also had 10 other exercises. A lot of them were a bit odd, in my opinion. It was like about time traveling. If you were 60 years old, and you were rich, what would you be doing? If you were 20 years old and you had the money in the world, what you'd be doing now? I kind of understand the purpose of these exercises is kind of like tapping into what you actually want to do and the things that you can do now to achieve what you technically want to be doing in 10 years or something. But I don't know, they were kind of odd to me in some ways, or the way that it was phrased. And there was also an exercise where you had to write a prayer to the great creator. And I was kind of confused by it. Like, the book gave me an example of how to write one, but I never even heard a prayer. So I didn't really know what to do, and I didn't really feel that I would want to do this. I don't know, I tried, but it just didn't really feel right to me. And throughout the book there was like a couple of sprinkles of mentions of God, that it helps you or it doesn't or whatever. And this is the first time where I was met with something like very specific, like, oh, write a prayer for God about creativity. And I'm like, oh. But yeah, I kind of skipped that exercise and was left a little bit confused in a way. Well, nonetheless, we're moving on to week 5, recovering a sense of possibility. This chapter starts with a lot of talk about God. And, well, as I brought it up before, if you don't believe in God, you can use something else that you believe in. And in my case, it was the universe. But when I replaced the word God with universe, for me, it doesn't really make that much sense. Like, the way that I believe in the universe doesn't really align with the way this book talks about God. And I think it's fine in general, but it's just a little bit confusing to me. For example, there's this sentence here. We come to recognize that God is unlimited in supply, that everyone has equal access. Like, equal access to creativity. I think that's what it says here. And that is not how I believe the world works. I think in general it's a good sentiment, and it's a nice way to look at things, is that everybody has an equal access to creativity. But for someone who doesn't believe in God, maybe this chapter is kind of difficult to read in some ways. And because of this first subchapter, I was honestly doubting if this book even is for me. Because so far, I didn't really find it that helpful in some ways. And secondly, it does talk about God a little bit more than maybe I expected. And so I went on the most trusted source that you can find on the internet, which is Reddit. And I wanted to hear other people's opinions about this book, and was it useful for them? Did they finish it? Did they stop? And apparently a lot of people do stop reading this book for many reasons. Some reasons are kind of related to the fact that there's a lot of mention of God. Other reasons could be that they started the book, realized that they need maybe therapy or to fix some issues that they're dealing with, and they stopped reading it until they fully dealt with that issue, and maybe then after that they would continue. And the people that did read it said that yes, certain parts of the book maybe are not for them. Certain exercises also maybe are not that useful for them. But how they got through it is that they found an online group that met up every week, discussed the book and what they did and the exercises and all that stuff. And in the end, when they finished the book, they were very happy about it. They were glad that they did it. And their main takeaways was that it is worth reading it, and just take the exercises that you feel, well, that speak to you or you find them kind of useful. So that's what I did. I was very close to not finishing this book, honestly, but I decided to push through it. And I decided to not do every single exercise in this book and just do the exercises that relate to me in some kind of way. And so week 5 also talks about seeing possibilities instead of obstacles. It explores how some people sacrifice their dreams in order to take care of their family, friends, or other obligations. So basically it helps you to overcome your imposed limitations. And the author encourages you to set healthy boundaries to make time to pursue the things that you actually want to do. Some of the exercises of the week was to make a mood board, to visualize your dreams, and to throw away the old stuff from your closet, which again, those things I already did actually not that long ago. But it's, I think, mainly because I moved here and I needed a new way to look at my life. And also I had so many clothes from high school, I just needed to get rid of those. They did not match my style nor my personality, so they had to go. So yeah, week 5, a bit rough, but we keep pushing and seeing if this book will actually be helpful for me. So week 6, recovering a sense of abundance. Week 6 talks about the biggest creative block, which is money. That chapter opens up with, again, talking about God and God's relationship with money and business. And for someone who believes in God, I feel like this is a useful chapter. For me, it's also a useful chapter, but again, I had to deconstruct it in some ways that it's helpful more for me, or reflects on how I believe the world functions. But in general, I think this chapter actually was very eye-opening for me, mainly because it touched on a subject that I had never really thought about, which is authentic luxuries. It is basically like a luxury that you buy yourself that is authentic to you. An example for me would be this notebook. And when I moved back to Latvia, I saw it in the local bookstore, and it was like €5, and it has a thicker paper to watercolor to paint on. And when I saw it in the bookstore, I was like, no, don't buy things that are kind of useless and you might not use or might not end up using. Why would you need this? I know it's €5, but you don't need this. And well, after having this dialogue with myself, I left that day without a notebook, but I came back the next day and I decided to buy it. Mainly because it was the time that I was thinking about starting to paint as a hobby, and I wanted to give it a shot. And €5 is not that much. Authentic luxuries is kind of like that. It's like the things that you don't really need to buy, but you do kind of need them to feed your soul in some ways. It could be something useful, like a notebook. I have another one that's right here. This one is very cute. I started sketching in it, and when I saw it in the store, I was like, I need this. It is my authentic luxury. I need this little notebook. It also was like €4. For me, it might be like a notebook or a pencil or a brush. For other people, it might be like a box of raspberries. In this book, there's a lady that really loves raspberries, and that's the tiny, small luxury that she allows herself to have because it makes her really happy and, gets her not in the mood, but in the mood to create, to be happy about life. The main exercise for this chapter was to count your money, to see where it's going and where you can maybe save some money, especially if you're living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe you can cut some corners or do something to allow yourself some authentic luxuries. And the rest of the 10 exercises were kind of exercises about abundance of resources, abundance of people, and just reminding you that you have enough things in life. One of the exercises was abundance of friends, and the exercise was about sending your friends a postcard, sending the friends that you really like a nice letter that maybe will make their day. Something like that. They were a bit cheesy, but also kind of nice. exercises, I would say. Week 7, recovering a sense of connection. This week talks about the purpose of artist dates is to find inspiration and finding your voice. And this week also talks about the fact that sometimes you have impulses and you should go for them. For example, when I was working on some of the paintings, sometimes I would not feel like painting anymore. Usually what I would do is I would take a little tiny brush and then try and make it very detailed, but at some point I was like, what if I try and outline this with a marker? And then I came up with this. And I think I did the right call. I think it looks quite nice. I think it's different, but it worked out. Sometimes your impulses don't really work out, like this one. Maybe you like it, I don't really like it, it's kind of but you know, sometimes you have to try something new. And same for another painting that I did. I had a similar impulse of like, I don't really feel like painting anymore. What if we take a silver pen and do the outlines like that? And I think it turned out quite cute. And this week's exercises changed everything for me. It changed my perspective on life. I'm not joking. The exercises themselves were pretty easy, but specifically the exercise number 8. It was list 5 of your favorite movies and see what are the similarities with each one. Are they similar? Are they not? And I did it. And to be honest, I'm not a big fan of movies. So I decided to put my favorite movies, favorite shows, and favorite albums and see if they are similar. Because when I look at them, I don't see that many similarities. But when I actually started analyzing them, I was like, oh my God, this is why I am who I am. This is why I am attracted to these types of artworks. Like, everything just clicked in place. And for me, it was such a big deal because for years I've been trying to figure out who I am creatively, especially for this channel. This channel kind of started off with me making videos about the Netherlands, and then I moved to Germany and I started making videos about Germany. And to be honest, it kind of all happened by accident. I just was, you know, I was living in Germany and I liked making videos, and I was like, might as well make videos about Germany because I'm interested in this topic since I'm here. But Germany was never the end point. I didn't see myself living there forever. So I knew that my channel had to change. But what is it? What is the channel? Where am I changing? Where am I going? What's the direction? And I feel like finally my eyes opened and I saw him. No, but I just saw me in these pieces of art because they spoke to me for some reason, because they are who I am. I don't know if this makes sense to you, I hope it does, but if you do it, maybe you'll also see what I mean. So from that point on, I was a changed person. Now I am just like more aware of what are my strengths and weaknesses and why I consume certain types of media. So that's fun. And I know this type of exercise is so easy. You might have found it already online, or I would have maybe stumbled upon it on TikTok, but I found it here. And I think that makes that this book was very much worth it for me to read it. But moving on to week 8, recovering a sense of strength. This chapter was quite long. I think it was the longest chapter of all, but it was very interesting for me. And I could relate to it because it also talks about topics that I never really thought about. One of them being that artists sometimes need to grieve their past potential. Like maybe at some point you had the opportunity to be an actor in a famous TV show, but you passed on it because you were a bit too scared and decided that maybe acting is not for you. And now you realize that you actually do want to become an actor, and you grieve the fact that you had this potential to be successful and you let it go because you were a bit too scared. And well, you have to grieve that. You kind of have to come to terms that it happened and it's okay to be sad and it's okay to try again. And the author encourages you to shift the perspective of how instead of why is it happening to me. In the exercises, it encourages you to dream your wildest dreams of whatever you want to be and then write down how you're gonna get there. For me, to be honest, I don't know what I want to do. I wrote down that I maybe want to make a movie, but like, do I? Like, I have no right reason to be doing that. I mean, I make YouTube videos and I like telling stories and I love Severance. I love that show. If you haven't watched it, you should watch it, but I don't know if that's my calling. I like making my videos in my room, and I really enjoy working on the game. So to be honest, I'm still trying to figure it out, and I couldn't really write down my wildest dreams. I have certain vague ideas of what I want to do and my motivation to do those things, but I don't really have this like, oh, I want to be this specific thing, because I don't know. And I think after reflecting on that, I think for me the best thing to do now is to just follow whatever inspires me or I think is cool in a creative sense. Like, for example, the show Severance, right? It's so cinematically well done, and I was like, damn, I should step up my cinematic game. I mean, I'm not saying I'm gonna make a movie, but maybe I'll just try some new angles and shots and just learn something new about how to make a nice composition. Yeah, just basically follow whatever kind of interests me, and maybe I'll end up at a point of like, oh, actually, I really want to do this. So yeah, the exercises were a bit rough in some ways because I couldn't really tell myself what I want to do, but you know, it gets you thinking. Week 9, recovering a sense of compassion. I think from week 9 I kind of started breezing through the weeks. Week 9 talks about fear, a sense of compassion, and imperfection. It talks about fear of success and fear of failure, the fact that you should be compassionate to yourself when you make mistakes. And it also talks about perfectionism, which I couldn't really relate to because I'm perfect. No, mainly because I make mistakes all the time. Last video, or the video before that, I made a video about Riga, and in the video I misspelled market, and I still put out the video. I just didn't notice, okay? I didn't notice, and now there's a mistake, a permanent mistake. Can't do much about that. Even if I looked at it for hours, I probably would not notice that I misspelled it. So I know I am not perfect, and that's okay. When it comes to exercise, it was a lot of self-reflection and looking back at your morning pages. So nothing crazy. Week 10, recovering a sense of self. This week talks about protecting your creative energy from negativity, self-doubt, and external influences that may drain you and discourage you. At this stage, you've probably made a lot of progress, but you're also quite vulnerable. And in this week, you look into your toxic patterns that may prevent you from being creative. The classic ones would be alcohol and drugs, but some of them are more subtle, like food or social media and workaholism. This chapter also talks about fame and competition and how it can affect your outcome and your work. So those things were quite interesting to read. I could relate to some of them, and in the exercise part it tells you like, hey, you should look into what kind of toxic patterns you have, because probably you have some, and what can you do about them. And one of the things that I have, that I think a lot of people have nowadays, is, well, too much social media. I know, right? So I installed an app that limits my TikTok time. I already have a limit for an hour, but now I have that after 7, it just logs me out. It's just like, nope, sorry, you can't look at TikTok after 7. And I'm like, yeah, that's fair. And then I decide to do something else. Then I go on YouTube. No, sometimes I put YouTube in the background and then do actually something more productive, like craft or something else. Week 11, recovering a sense of autonomy. At week 11, you're fully stepping into your identity as an artist, without waiting for external approval, financial security, or the perfect conditions. So here the author talks about that you should trust yourself, embrace your creativity, and make art regardless of the outcome. And also sports are good. You should do some sports that you like or that are easy for you to do. And well, it helps your body and your mind. And now the final week, week 12. Recovering a sense of faith. I was excited to finally finish up this book. The first few chapters were a bit rough for me, but after week 7 it was kind of smooth sailing. Chapter 12 again tells you about that you should trust yourself, that you should follow your inner child artist, and that you should protect them from other people that don't really understand or see your vision or what you're doing. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from this book that I might not really have mentioned throughout this video is pretty well summed up in this quote. It is a paradox of creative recovery that we must get serious about taking ourselves lightly. That is the reason we do the morning pages and we go on artist dates, is to tap into this inner artist. You have to find time in this busy life where you can just play around and explore and think about things, I suppose. So, yeah. And the book ends with good luck and God bless you. So, did this book change my life? Yes and no. This book explores a lot of things that you might be dealing with as an artist. It covers so many interesting topics and it makes you feel less alone, because a lot of the things that we experience in life, as you may see from TikTok, is not an original experience. So it's nice to feel that it's just part of the process. There are many great tips and insights that many of them I had to learn myself through my own experience of being a person in a creative field. And honestly, I don't regret reading this book, mainly because of week 7, of that exercise that just kind of opened up my eyes to who I am. So in some ways, it didn't really change my life. I'm still here. I'm still doing the same thing as I was doing when I started reading this book. I didn't move to a new country or started a new career, but I am way more aware of who I am, which I think is so valuable for me right now, because I was trying to figure it out for so long. And these stories of people that did start a new life, move to a new place and start a new career, it makes sense why it happened because of this book, is because it just, encourages you to go for it, to try things, and then just sometimes synchronicity happens and sometimes opportunities just fall into your lap unexpectedly, and then just the ball keeps rolling and it gets bigger and bigger. So in some ways, the book didn't really change my life, in the sense that I wasn't a blocked artist and I am pursuing my creative endeavors, but it did change my perspective on myself. So should you read this book, and will it change your life? I think if you are scared of being creative or you feel like you have an art block and you believe in God, I think this is a perfect book for you. If you're someone like me who doesn't really believe in God, who wasn't really blocked from the beginning, I wouldn't say this was that life-changing. And that's also okay. Not everything can be for everybody, and I fully get that. I think this is a good book in general. I think it has great insights and perspective, and I am glad I read this book. But you can be the better judge of if this book fits for you or not. Again, if you're someone who relates more to my experiences, I would actually recommend you to read The Creative Act, A Way of Being. Maybe you've seen it. It kind of looks like a nipple, just saying, but it was a really nice read. It more explores the way that things are created and the way you can nurture your ideas and what ideas are good or bad. It was a bit odd to start the book because it's written in a very poetic way, but when you get into it, it is very nice and calm and peaceful in a sense, and also, educational. It talks about the way we create art and how we can create good art or bad art and execution and all that stuff. A lot of the ideas that are in this book is also in that book, because being creative is not that unique of an experience in some ways. Yeah, I hope this video was helpful for you. It was a fun 12 weeks. It was fun filming this video. So let me know if you read the book and what are your thoughts on it. Do you agree? Do you disagree with my takes? I would love to read them. And yeah, that's about that.